Hi, I'm Lanny, and this is Preserving Today. All right, on this episode, I'm going to talk about how I ferment carrot sticks quickly and easily with no special equipment. These only take a couple days to ferment, and they're one of my favorite recipes to recommend to new fermenters, beginning fermenters that might be intimidated by the process. For this recipe, all you need is carrots, water, and salt. But you have the option of adding other flavorings in that will infuse into the carrot sticks as they ferment. For this recipe, I'm using pickling spice along with my sea salt and water. So in a quart jar, I'm just adding 2 teaspoons of pickling spice, and I've peeled and cut my carrots to similar size, and I'm stuffing those into my jar, and I want to stuff them in as tightly as possible. This is one of the tricks I use for this recipe to avoid having to use a follower or a weight. So you can watch some of my other fermentation videos to understand what that means or look it up. But for this one, we're not using any special equipment. So I don't need anything special to hold these carrots down under the brine because I'm going to use 2 tricks. And one of them is to stuff these carrot sticks in as hard as I can so they're as tight as possible. And when I add the liquid, they're not going to float to the surface because they're stuck in the jar. Next, I have a pint of water, which is 2 cups or 16 ounces, and I add a tablespoon of sea salt. I just need to stir this up. I'm not doing any of the fancy stuff that other people do, like boil the water. This is just fine. So I should say it doesn't have fluoride or chlorine in it. If you can find a water that is more pure, that's the way to go. If you can't, try it anyway and see what happens. I pour the brine that I've created over the carrots, and I place a normal canning lid, the flat and the band on. And I'm fine to do this tightly because I'm going to come back to this and flip it over like that at least once a day. And at that time, I'm going to open it and let any gases out that might form. This is what they look like after 24 hours. You can see the brine is starting to be kind of dyed a color by the carrots. You can see some foamy bubbles on the surface. And in this second jar, I went ahead and used the rest of my carrots and just sliced some ginger. And you can play with any flavor combinations you want to. You could add jalapenos if you wanted it spicy. You could add onions and garlic. It doesn't matter. Okay, looking down from the top, there are bubbles on the surface. This is a good sign that fermentation is started and taking place. And this is, again, just after 24 hours. And the one with the pickling spice is a little more foamy. That's also totally fine and normal. All I need to do is make sure I open them at least once a day, even every 12 hours if your house is really hot, and then also flip them over once a day. Now, for the flipping over part, a lot of people are going to say, you can't ferment with metal. And it's kind of true. Salt water and, acidic material on metal for a long period of time will corrode it. It'll eventually get rusty. These carrot sticks are going to go so fast, it doesn't really matter. But to be extra careful, I'm going to put this cling wrap over the jar before I put the lid on so that the metal won't actually be touching any of the brine when I flip it over. Flipping it over is just disturbing the surface so mold won't have a chance to grow. And it's also making sure the carrots are going to be evenly coated in the brine. Now, here after 48 hours, you can see not only is the liquid brine dyed kind of an orangey brown color, it's also starting to get cloudy. And that cloudiness is the lactobacillus bacteria doing its thing. And it's going to be turning that into an acidic liquid, making these pickled and preserved. So at this 48-hour mark, I'm taking the lid off, letting any CO2 that built up in the jar out, and flipping it over, jostling it around to disturb the surface. Doing this to both jars consistently is important. And again, if my house was warmer, I would be doing this every 12 hours, once in the morning and once in the evening before bed. Heat is going to increase the rate in which your food ferments. So it will need to ferment for a shorter period of time than it will if you live in a colder environment. In this video, my house was probably between 65 and 75 overnight and during the day. Okay, here we are after 3 days. You'll notice the brine is even cloudier. There are still bubbles, but they're starting to mellow out a little bit. And the brine is even darker than it was before. And with carrots, they're high in sugar, so you don't need to ferment them for very long. If you do, they're prone to growing calm yeast on the surface. And they're also prone to having a slightly alcoholic taste because of the sugar. So to avoid that, I do a short ferment. 3 days is plenty. With the spices in the jar that has the pickling spice, you might notice some white, kind of powdery looking stuff at the bottom. That's yeast, and that's totally normal. I'm going to taste one of these carrot sticks, and it's good. Still crunchy, but way softer than a raw carrot, but still crispy, snappy, like a really good pickle. That's what I'm going for when I'm trying my fermented carrots, and then I know they're done fermenting. After they're done to my liking, I can move them into the refrigerator to store them for longer. The cold temperature of the refrigerator is going to slow things down immensely and make it so that they can store for longer without really changing the flavor or texture much. I preserve a lot of my garden harvest with fermentation, and some I can keep in my refrigerator after it's fermented for a year or more. Carrot sticks are not always the case, so I do recommend doing these maybe in smaller batches, seeing how you like them, and working through them in a couple of weeks. And you don't have to do just uniform carrot sticks. I've done whole carrots, leaving the tail and some of the stalk on from my garden, scrubbed them off and put them in, and they were beautiful. The carrots preserved whole with the skin on lasted way longer in the refrigerator than the cut carrot sticks that I made from carrots from the store. Have you ever made fermented carrot sticks? What did you think? Let me know in the comments. I'm Lanny, and this was Preserving Today.